In this week's Parsha, Parshas Tazria Metzora, the Torah speaks about the process of somebody who has saras, how he has to go to the Kayin, and the Kayin has to look to determine if this affliction is indeed that of saras or not. And if you look inside the text of the Pasuk, there seems to be some extra words. Parakut Gimel Pasuk Gimel starts off V'ra HaKayin, and the Kayin looks as Hanega at the affliction, and he has to determine if the appearance is that of Tsaras or not. And the Pasuk concludes V'ra'ahu HaKayin V'timei Isai, and the Kayin looks at him and pronounces him, makes him Tamei. And we know once he's Tamei, he then has to go into quarantine, into isolation for 7 days michutz lamachane. But why does the pasuk repeat V'ra Kohen twice? And secondly, the only one who can make somebody and pronounce someone a Metzora is a Kohen. You can have the biggest Talmid Chacham, the biggest expert in Hilchas Saras. If he's not a Kohen, then he does not have the power and ability to pronounce someone Tamei and a Metzora. Why is that? It says the Meshech Chachma that in the pasuk that says V'ra HaKayin twice, there are two separate things that the Kayin has to look at. The very first one is when the person comes to the Kayin. V'ra HaKayin, what does that Kayin look at? Hanega. He looks at the symptom. He looks at the affliction to determine there's certain parameters, there's certain appearances and halachas that apply if this is going to be a tsaras or not. And once the Kayin indeed determines that this constitutes tsaras, that's not enough to make him tamei and pronounce him tamei. The Kayin still needs to do one more thing. V'ra'ahu ha'kayin. And the Kayin has to look at him. The first time the Kayin looks, it's V'ra HaKayin es Hanega. The Kayin looks at the affliction. But the second time, it's the Kayin has to look at him, at the person. V'ra'ahu HaKayin. The Kayin looks at him, at the person. Says the Meshech Chachma, before the Kayin can pronounce him Tamei and cause him to go michutz lamachane for 7 days in isolation, the Kayin has to look at the person in his totality to see if he's a person who is able at this present moment to withstand such a pronouncement, to withstand such a consequence. Is it appropriate to put this person right now into a state of tameh, in a state of go michutz lamachane, even if his affliction constitutes and fits the criteria of tsaras? The Gemara says that there are certain times that the Kayin cannot put a person into the state of Metzora and Tumah, such as if a person is in the middle of his Sheva Brachas, he's a Chassid or a Kala, it's in the middle of the Sheva Brachas, it's an inappropriate time that they should interfere and disrupt their celebration and their joyous occasion, and then one of them is going to have to go michutz lamachane, even if halachically the affliction, the nega, is that of Metzora. Similarly, says the Gemara, if it's in the middle of the Yom Tov of Sukkot or the Yom Tov of Pesach, when everyone's Oila Regel and everybody's being Mesameach and celebrating the Yom Tov, that's not the time to send somebody out michutz lamachane. So says the Meshech Chachma, just like the time has to be appropriate for the consequence and for the punishment, so too the person has to be evaluated. You need to see the entirety of the person. You can't just look at the symptom and divorce that from the person that's going to be affected. V'ra'ahu ha'kayin. The Kayin has to look at him, and only then can the Kayin pronounce him Tamei. And that's why it's only the Kayin. Because the Kayin, the Kayhanim, have the unique mitzvah of Birchas Kayhanim. The Beis Hamikdash has happened all the time. Obviously, in Galus we only do it on Yom Tif, but in Metzora they do it every day as well. The Kohanim were given the mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim, and the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem that the Kohen makes. Asher Kedeshanu b'kedushasei shel Aaron v'tzivanu levarech es Ama Yisrael bi'ahava. A Kohen is commanded that every day he should stand up before the cloud and he should give forth a bracha that has to come from his heart. It has to come bi'ahava, with love, with a connection to every yid. So only somebody or a group of people which are kaihanim, who have daily practice of ahavas Yisrael, of looking at the good in Klal Yisrael and feeling the connection and the positive feelings and blessing them as such, only such people can condemn a man to the tomb of Metzora and send Michutz LaMachne for 7 days in quarantine. Because only such a person who's predicated, who is in a solid ground and a solid foundation of Ahavas Yisrael, only such a person can judge the entirety, can be Vira'ahu HaKayin, can see the whole person and see where's he coming from. Is this person struggling with something else? Is this person going through other issues in his life? Is it appropriate right now, at this time, the same way chassan, the same way we don't send the chassan out and we don't send out during Yom Tiv, maybe this person is going through other things. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Have it done es kol ha'adam lekaf, which we loosely translate to mean that we should judge each other favorably. But that's not the literal translation of the word have it done as kol ha'adam lekaf. The literal translation is have it done as kol ha'adam. If you want to evaluate a person, it has to be as kol ha'adam, the entirety of the person. Don't just look at the isolated incident, at the small thing that you saw. There's much more to the person. Do you know where this person is coming from? Do you know what this person has gone through in life? Do you know if this person is struggling with something? Do you know how his marriage is? Do you know how his parnasa is? Do you know how he is with his kids? You may think you know the person, but as much as you see, there's more that's hidden that you don't know. If you don't know it's kol ha'adam, you can't judge. But if you see es kol ha'adam, then it will be lekaf sachos. Have it done as kol ha'adam. If you evaluate the entirety of a person, then it'll be lekaf sachos. It's going to be favorably and for positivity. Because then you'll understand when this person's not a rasha, this person's not a bad person. You have to look at the entirety of a person. And that's what this pasuk is coming to tell us. Who earns the right to judge? Who earns the right to condemn and criticize? Only a kayin who practices daily hamavarich es Ama Yisrael bi'ahava. Now I could come and I could look at the entire person, and then I could determine if he's tamei or not, and he has to go michutz l'machane. But if I don't have the ability to see the entire person, and if I don't have the ability to see the person with love, with caring, with concern, if my only way I view people is through the lens and perspective of negativity, of putting down, then I have no right to judge. I have no right to open my mouth. There's a beautiful story of Aryeh Levine, the tzaddik of Yerushalayim. He was once walking in the streets of Yerushalayim, and he saw in the distance a former Talmud of his that's walking. And this Talmud had gone off the derech and wasn't wearing a yarmulke. And as they approached each other, and the Talmud noticed that Rabbi Levine is coming close, the Talmud crossed the street to avoid his Rebbe. Rabbi Levine crossed the street and went after this Talmud and gave him a big hello and said, "Why did you cross the street? Why are you trying to avoid me?" So the Talmud says, "I was ashamed. I'm not wearing a yarmulke on my head, and I don't want you to see me." So Rabbi Levine looked at him and said, "Don't you see that I'm a short man? and I could only see up to your heart. Do we care and are we concerned about somebody else's well-being, about someone else's success, as much as we notice other people's shortcomings? It's very natural that when we look at other people, and in fact, when we look at ourselves, we only see the negativity. We only see the flaws. It's very natural that in order to make us feel better and to feel more than, we need to put other people down. But this week's Parsha tells us a very powerful lesson. I need to be able to see past just what's right in front of me, just the small weakness, the small tendency. There's much more to the person that you don't know. How much of this person do you really know? And when you understand the person's life story, when you understand the person's life situation, you won't come to the same negative conclusion. But how do I do that? How do I see the whole person? When I become like a kohen, that I could be levarach am Yisrael b'ahava. Do I look at people positively? Do I encourage them? Do I give a good word? I've experienced this myself, where when I was younger, I had cancer, and a few years later, I was at a wedding, and at the wedding, I met somebody of a rabbinic stature who knew me for many years. And at that wedding, for whatever the reason is, I wasn't wearing my hat. So when I met this person, he looks at me, and with a critical eye, he says, "That's it? You don't wear a hat anymore in public?" And this person, when I was sick, he didn't once call me or send me a message, say, "Zevi, how you feeling? I'm davening for you. I'm thinking of you. Give a chizuk," something. No. That he wasn't able to do. But when he saw me without a hat, he had to say, he had to give me that barb. And that's natural, unfortunately. But can we be like the Kayin? Can we be like Rabbi Levine? That all I see is up to your heart. And that's what matters.